Welcome to the UnLearn show. We have the absolutely lovely Michaela Alexis joining us today. Michaela, thank you so much. And we know tomorrow's Canada Day, so I hope you haven't started partying yet.
No, I've been stretching, doing some stretches, some lunges, just prepping.
Well, only as a Canadian can. That's awesome. So this is the UnLearn show where we talk about breaking bad habits with a purpose. We're excited to have you here. Michaela, we'd love for you to just give us a little bit of an introduction. Tell us who you are, what you do, and then one of the co-hosts will jump in and start leading us off. So thank you again.
Thanks. So, I guess the short version of my story is I'm kind of like a job seeker turned LinkedIn creator. So I started on LinkedIn about 2.5 years ago while I was looking for work, and kind of realized pretty quickly that there's something really special about the community, and there's a better way of looking for work and finding opportunities that wasn't the let's send out a bazillion resumes and let's interrupt people constantly and let's constantly be pitching people. And really it was building relationships and trying to provide as much value as possible with really just the intention of kind of like being a resource. So I started writing articles on LinkedIn. My first article went viral in March 2016. It was called How I Landed My Dream Job in 2 Weeks on LinkedIn. And at that point I was hooked because I felt like there was a really big gap on LinkedIn at the time of people that just weren't talking about the things that we were all dealing with. So like confidence, fear of failure, unemployment, all of those things. So I decided to kind of dive into those topics. And sorry, my dogs are constantly wrestling. And started doing campaigns to try and reach as many people and help as many people as possible. And that's kind of led me to where I am today.
Okay, so Michaela, you are a powerhouse, right? And I was kind of curious because you're talking about, you're seeing these gaps and things like that. What is your driver? Like, what pushed you to talk about these things, right? Because it's not, the things that you talk about aren't, typical, they're kind of taboo topics. So what inside you made you think that, like, I want to talk about these things?
Well, I mean, I looked at the popularity of the article topics on LinkedIn, and everyone was saying that there's like this, like we have the professional self and then the personal self, and yet the third most popular topic was self-esteem. So I'm like, we're saying one thing, but we're consuming very differently. And for me, it was not like, I am not the type of person that like dives into anything. Like I dip my toes into like literally when it comes to water, like I'm dipping my toes like one toe at a time. So the way that I write content now, of course, is like very, very kind of like out there, very open and transparent. But when I started, it was just kind of opening up about looking for work because I felt like that was a hole, and people were constantly basically like they would leave a role and then they would start talking about their new role. And then there was like this huge gap in their story. I'm like, why are we so afraid to talk about grief and, self-esteem issues, losing confidence throughout the job search? Why are we so afraid to tackle those issues? And so that's kind of like my starting point. And then from there I was hooked, and I'm like, there are so many other things that we can be talking about, like besides like the awards that we've won, just basically trying to impress people. And I just thought that there was a better way of connecting.
Was it always like that, or was there sort of like a buildup? Was there a pivotal moment that happened and then you're like, oh, I'm going to put this out there? Or was it just sort of like this gradual thing?
Well, when I was looking for work, I sent out a whole bunch of different resumes and none of them were read. And so I decided to take a different approach just as a marketer, being like, okay, like I'm going to rely on the community. I'm going to put out as much content as possible to show that I know what I'm doing. And so I posted something on LinkedIn about the type of role that I was looking for. And hey, my dogs are like children. Um, and and from there, I don't know, it's just I started to realize that people actually cared about my story. And I guess that was kind of strange for me, because I didn't really think that anybody would care about where I was interviewing or how I was feeling that day. And what I found instead is that people from like all over my city, and I live in a pretty large city in Ottawa, the capital of Canada, and people were still checking in with me on a daily basis, being like, "What happened today? Like, tell us what happened today." I'm like, okay. Like, I just didn't think, in my head, I didn't think that anybody cared that much about our stories. But I mean, you guys all know, like, that's just not the case. Like, we want to connect. We have a human innate desire to connect with other people, especially when they're going through something that we have gone through, or that we might go through in the future.
So, hi. So,
Hey, Chantel.
sorry, my connection here is super weird. So if I lag out, I'm sorry. You're so open about anxiety, right? And that the piece of that played in your job search, or even, speaking in public. What piece did having anxiety play in your job search, and how did the community play a part in that? Can you talk, do you feel comfortable talking about that?
About like fear of public speaking?
No, when you went through this, this job search, right? And you were opening up to the community and you were being vulnerable. What piece did anxiety play in that puzzle, and how did the community help or even hurt the anxiety?
So, I've always found that, like, for me personally, social media has always been a way for me to, I don't want to say get past my anxiety, but to make life a little bit easier for myself. So my biggest fear, and I don't know if I'm the only one, but walking in cold to a room of people that you don't know, that don't know anything about you, and like trying to connect with them like over drinks or something like that in a really like cold environment. And so for me, and especially like I did suffer from agoraphobia for a year and a half, so I was stuck inside. And, regardless of whether or not you have, severe social anxiety or agoraphobia, you still have that human desire to connect with other people. There's nobody in the world that's like, yeah, I would rather be alone for the rest of my life, right? So we just need to learn to connect with people in different ways. And for me, social media was a really great outlet, because I felt like it was like a little bit more comfortable for me to share myself rather than just like walking out to somebody and introducing myself. And what made it really cool is that, anytime I would go to an event, or if I went into an interview, it was really kind of like a meet and greet, like with old friends, rather than me trying to prove my worth every time I met a new person. So for me personally, when it comes to anxiety, I know that so many people talk about how detrimental social media is, but it's always kind of been my saving grace, because I've been able to meet, Chantel, we met over social media, right? So, and there's so many people on LinkedIn that I met through social, or obviously on LinkedIn, on social media, that have become really great friends, and are those moments are some of my favorite moments in my life. So as somebody with anxiety, I think that there's two different paths that you can go down. The more intentional use of social media, which is finding your tribe, the people whose values align with yours that you can learn and grow with. Or you can get into like the terrible habit of like going on Instagram and like kind of like scrolling through your feed and comparing yourself to everybody who's like skinnier than you or richer than you or is going on better vacations than you, which is, in those scenarios, it's like just log off and like rethink how you're using the whole platform.
How do you suggest, do you have like a tip for building that tribe? Like just one tip that you can give to help people find who they mesh with and who will help build them up to be the best person they can be?
I think that you start with one person, right? So when it comes to LinkedIn, I'm going to talk about LinkedIn because that's kind of like my social media home. But if you find somebody like let's say somebody follows you, right? They find your content and they're like, I love Chantel. Well, then you're also probably going to love like Goldie and Katie, me, Natalia. Like what's ended up happening for me personally on LinkedIn is that people have like forced me to connect with other people, being like, you guys need to meet. People did that with like Natalia for me. People did that with Alex Galvez for me. So I think that just find that one person that who you're like, yeah, like I feel like they're speaking to me, and look at who they're connecting to and who they're interacting with, because like chances are that you're also going to enjoy their content as well.
Thank you.
So you recently kind of made a switch, right, from your path that you took that kind of was like LinkedIn was kind of this catalyst to this amazing, huge career opportunity for you. And then you realized that wasn't really what you wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell a little bit about that process and how that felt, and what you can kind of tell people going through the same thing, that maybe they wake up one day and they're like, I am not where I think I should be?
Yeah, I think that for me personally, that jump was probably, I mean, it was the hardest moment of my career. And it was magnified by the fact that I had to do it so publicly, but that's part of, the journey too, right? You can't just have the good where it's like, yay, Michaela, killing it. It's like, go. That's a great part. But when you fail, you're also failing not just, with yourself, or you're trying to deal with that on your own, and also with your friends and family, but you're also dealing with it with like 100,000 other people that you need to answer to. So that was a really, really tough thing for me, because I had to make a really tough decision on my own and come to terms with it on my own, and then explain it to my husband, explain it to my family and my close friends, and then announce it. And then I had to deal with people that, and I think that it's valid that they were saying, I don't trust you as much anymore, because you said that this was your dream and it's no longer your dream. And like, I don't know how to like repair this relationship. And it's a weird relationship to have with somebody that you don't know, but at the same time, like, I understand it, right? People do change their minds, and I'm really grateful that for the most part, that hasn't really been the scenario. For the most part, people have been really supportive regardless. And I've tried to kind of just be as honest as possible. But yeah, that jump was really scary. And I have people every single day that reach out to me and say, I want to make that jump, but like, it's scary. So how do I do it? And I don't have any good answer for that. I felt nauseous and I shut out the world for a week. Like there's no easy way of changing your mind and changing your life and pivoting like that much. Right. And when it comes to building a business and walking away from it, I mean, you basically are like birthing something and then walking away from it. And really, really emotional. And especially for me, I mean, this was, and still is, originally was a dream company that I was working for. And, I love my business partners that, were my bosses at one point and then became my business partners. And so there were like real friendships and real relationships that were also involved in that. So there's all sorts of like moving parts when it comes to changing your life. But really for me, at the end of the day, I just want to be able to look back on my life and say that I did everything that my heart told me to do, rather than what society or the world was telling me that I should want. And so that's kind of been my driving force. And I truly believe that if you have an overall purpose, it really does become a guiding light to be able to make those really tough decisions.
Yeah, I agree.
So Michaela, speaking of your overall purpose, what would you tell people that is? Why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I think, when I was little, I had one friend, and he's a Hollywood producer, and he told me at one point, this was like months ago, and this was right before I was making the decision. He's like, Michaela, whatever you were doing between 8 and 13 is what you should be doing for the rest of your life. I'm like, that's terrible advice. And then I thought about it for days, and I started thinking about what I was doing between 8 and 13, like what I was doing for fun. And that's basically the idea, is what were you doing before the world told you what you should want to do? And for me, that's always been writing. I was writing and I was entering for fun essay writing competitions when I was 8 with like high school kids. And I just did it for the money. Honestly, I think like the prize was like $50 or something like that, which is like, you're 8 years old. That's like a gold mine, right? When like Toys R Us was still around, that's like a full shopping spree. So I would do that. And then I was also really, really shy around other people. But then I would constantly be winning these like, hey, come here. These public speaking competitions. And I would go from being like a really shy girl to being on stage and being a totally different person, and I'm still like that today. Very, very similar. So my purpose overall, I think, is to help people and guide people through. I'm going to pause for 1 second.
That's
okay.
awesome.
I thought for sure the like 12. I was gonna say Disney princess because that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a Disney princess. I'm still trying to get my way into Disney someday. Come on, Michaela. It wasn't a Disney princess.
I could definitely see that. But yeah, I think overall it's just to help people learn the things that I've learned to be able to take full control of your life. Like the fact that I kind of by accident stumbled upon personal branding, and I've been able to create a presence that is bigger than where I work because people like and trust me. And I think that everybody has amazing stories. I don't think that there's a single person, and I have all sorts of clients from like students to CEOs of like unsexy industries. Everybody has a story. And so if I can teach people how to kind of bring out those stories and be able to kind of reconcile this like tension between the personal and professional self, so that you're not pretending to be one person when you're working and then a different person when you're like on the weekend. I think that for me is what makes my heart sing. As like cheesy as that sounds, it's every single time I'm with a client or I'm training or I'm speaking and I see this like aha moment in somebody, like my heart just skips a beat. It's like I fall in love with my career all over again.
So did you discover that kind of the writing? And I mean, you like to communicate, you like to write, you like to speak, you like to help. Is that something that you just stumbled upon in that age range? Or do you feel like that you saw something around you when you were younger that say, hey, I need to help people do this because I'm not seeing it?
So when I was really little, so my brother, he's my half brother, Andre Alexis. He won the Giller Prize about 2 years ago. So he's like a pretty well-known writer in Canada. A lot of people don't know that. If somebody has the last name Alexis, chances are we're related. But so I, from like a very, very young age, and my mom's also a teacher and she's a phenomenal writer. And so I've always been surrounded by stories. When I was little, I would like tell my parents to make up stories because I wanted to hear those rather than read books. And so it was always encouraged. And even when we were like creating like Christmas gifts or like birthday gifts for other people, my mom would force us to like write poems or write short stories. And like there's literally, it was called the Alexis Anthology. Oh God, it's so dorky now that I think about it. But it was like a collection of like little stories like from me and my brother and my sister growing up that we would gift to people on Christmas. And so it's always kind of been inside me. I think that storytelling is the greatest catalyst for delivering a message. And I was just thinking about it this morning, like thinking about people that like go on LinkedIn, these CEOs that are like posting the values of their company. It's like, this is what we stand for. And it's like the same thing as like everybody else stands for. So there's that way of doing it versus like me, I did an update about a year ago and it was talking about the story about how I came up with the values for Grade A Digital, like sitting there and like scribbling things down and then like crossing them out and like being at my office at 8 p.m. being like, no, I need to get this down. And then like, so like really telling the whole story and then asking other people what their values are. And yes, that looked like this like really fluffy story, but really it was a call to action to be like, these are our goals, or these are our values. If your values are similar, we should probably work together. So even when it comes to like these like hardcore sales that you're trying to achieve, there's a way that you can do it through storytelling.
Yep, that's great.
So Michaela, you talk about the main driver for you in the very beginning about self-esteem as that kind of that third piece that you saw on LinkedIn a long time ago, and you talk about stories. It's the Unlearn show. So tell us about what you had to unlearn about your self-esteem when you hit the very bottom. And I don't want you to use the story of losing your job. Everybody knows that one. Tell us about one that's a little bit more personal to you. So something that's not the professional, not the personal, but on the self-esteem. What did you have to unlearn to get yourself out from that very bottom spot to where you are today?
Well, so, okay, I think probably the best example is before I started on LinkedIn, because, you know, I had agoraphobia. So like going from being agoraphobic and not being able to leave my house to like public speaking internationally is a pretty big jump. So I feel like I'm really lucky, because the one thing that I really had to, well, unlearn, I don't know if unlearn is the best word for it, but this idea that people are attracted to perfection. So my agoraphobia came about because I had a panic attack in public. And it really came from the fear of having another panic attack in front of other people. And like going even deeper than that, it came from the idea that people would see me as weak or imperfect. And so I had to kind of like rearrange my thinking and say, I have two choices here. I can either go down this path where I'm constantly concerned about what everybody else thinks about me, about looking perfect, and always being on, or I can embrace the fact that I am a messed up human being like everybody else. I'm gonna screw up, I'm gonna be imperfect, and just live my life fully, because I was really shackled by my mindset at that point. And what's really surprising is that, you know, when it comes to these phobias, my brain was literally telling my body that I was sick. Like I would go onto a train and my brain would say, like after I would get to a certain stop, I'm unsafe, I'm feeling sick because I'm unsafe, this is dangerous. And I would have like a full out like anxiety attack and have to get off. And I think that's, to me, is such a huge wake up call. And it's something that I'm constantly thinking about, that you can change your life by changing your mindset. Because your brain can literally shut down your success, shut down your progress, shut down your growth, if you let it. So that was the biggest thing for me that I had to unlearn, is this idea that perfect human beings are the ones that get ahead, because I don't think that's true.
I love that. And if you had the opportunity to share that knowledge or that tip with one person, so somebody that's out there today, it could be fictional, real, whatever it may be, who is that one person that you would want to share that with in the community because you think it would just make that much of a difference?
Well, I think, I mean, there's a whole bunch of people. I think that, you know, we tend to talk about, and I talk about it a lot because that's kind of where my platform was grown, about job seekers and people losing their jobs. And I think that losing your job is a really hard thing. There's a lot of grief that's involved in it. It's a really traumatic experience. But those aren't the people that I feel sorry for, because for me, I know that every time I walk away from something, you know, that feels like the end, it's a beginning of something new. And I think that the end of something is just a beginning of another thing overall. The people that I really feel sorry for, and I wake up every single day and I feel nauseous just thinking about, are the people that are constantly looking at the clock and waiting for Friday, waiting for the weekend, feeling sick when they wake up on a Sunday morning because they're dreading going into work the next day, having a countdown clock on their computer, set to the date that they're going to retire because they hate their job so much. So for those people, it's this idea, and I feel like a lot of people feel shackled to what they do because they're so concerned of how they're going to look to everybody else. So many people talk about gaps in your resume, job hopping, all of these things that, I mean, hi, like ultimate job hopper, you know, Gap, sure, you name it. I have all those things. But that doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what do you want your legacy to be? The person that played it safe and had a comfortable life, or the person that went for it and did what they loved, and shared that like positivity with everyone around them? Because I truly believe when you're in alignment with your beliefs and values, everybody else around you is positively affected by that. So those are the people that I'm constantly trying to reach, and I'm always thinking about.
Love that answer. Thanks, Michaela. And I think at this point, I'm going to open it up to the co-host one last time.